You know how many testimonies I've got from people all over the world that say to me, Pastor, has anybody else ever said this to you? I love that, because we always think we're the only one. And every one of them says, has anybody else ever said to you that when they came into the knowledge of grace, they felt like God to them was like it was when they was a little kid? And I always smile because I say, I know you feel like you're by yourself, but I've never met a grace person yet that won't admit that the day I realized it was truly paid for, not only was it like I got born again all over again, it reminded me of what I thought of God when I was 7 or 8 or 10, before I was too Christianized to know better, before somebody had preached religion into me enough to where that God didn't exist anymore. I think that's the crying shame, is that somewhere we took that God and we set him aside. And Jesus says to his disciples, here's some stuff I want to leave with you when I go. Now, at risk it was at risk of stealing my own thunder earlier that I told you that it's peace is our starting point, but who cares? What an amazing thing. Let the thunder be stolen. May we never stop dwelling on the fact that he has handed us his peace. I want to take a time. I just want to take a second there, because peace is the most elusive thing for most of us in our society. We're going to go home, we're going to turn on the news, and it's all going to go flying out the window. Because we for so long have based our peace on what the world told us about peace. And it's why there's freaking out. It's an election cycle, and they're freaking out because the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And I don't know if we're going to be able to recover. And that's what we said 4 years ago, and it's what we said 8 years ago, and it's what we said 12 years ago and 16 years ago. And if you just keep going back, there's always been all of us freaking out that it was all over with, because we've all based our peace on man and his system and his rules and his laws and his regulations. And Jesus said, you're better than that. Of his fullness we have all received grace for grace. And Jesus grabs it and reaches across. I always use that physical image because he really did that with the bread and the blood. That powerful moment of, and you grab that and you would eat that, as you would savor that. Wouldn't you do the same if into the middle of your crises and your storms, Jesus said, my peace, here you go. All you gotta do is take it. And you reach out and grab that piece, and you would just, everything else would melt away. So why don't we have that? Because we have ignored the last part of that verse where Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Right before that, he said, my peace I leave with you, not as the world leaves their peace, do I leave it with you. There's 3 parts to that verse. My peace I leave with you, not as the world leaves it, leave I with you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. They all build on each other. I'm going to give you peace, but the reason why a lot of you are not going to be able to take it is because you're only going to receive it the way you receive it from the world. And the way you receive it from the world is, peace is just the absence of bad news. So as long as there's bad news, I can have no peace. And if I have it, I got to pay for it. And Jesus says, I'm going to give you a peace that is never going to be like the world. So if the world says that peace is the absence of bad news, and that if you get it, you're going to earn it, what if you get Jesus' peace, which is nothing like the world? That must mean that peace happens even in the middle of bad news. And it must mean that you don't have to pay for it. The perfect moment of peace is when Jesus gets on the boat with his disciples and he says, let's go over to the other side. And he goes to sleep. He's tired. Maybe he doesn't start out to teach an object lesson. He's just tired. And it's really comfy on that boat. So he just falls asleep. And it's blissful. And it's wonderful. And here comes a storm. And it's tragic. And they're professional fishermen and they're freaking out. And they don't know what to do. So you go, what do you do when you don't know what to, if you're a professional fisherman and you're in the middle of a storm and you don't know what to do, you go wake up the carpenter. Because that makes perfect sense. Go get someone who's completely outside of their genre and ask them to take over. It would be like David calling me and saying, hey, Paul, I got a case, don't know how to handle it. You want to come and argue this one for me? They go, yeah, if you're ready to lose, let's go for it. You know? And the disciples go wake up the carpenter. Of course they believe he's more than a carpenter. That's why they wake him up. We understand that. And he just looks past their foolishness and he walks to the edge of the boat and he speaks to the storm and he says, in the Greek emphasis is tough. The English cleans up. You know, we cleaned up a lot of stuff in the English Bible because we're so sensitive. We can't take it the way. The Greek, Jesus looks at the storm and says, shut up. There's an emphatic boldness in the Greek to what Jesus says. It's basically, shut up. You've already made enough noise. Which tells me the storm was not from God. Otherwise, Jesus rebuked his own Father. God didn't send him the storm to teach him a lesson. It's the cares of this life. It's the rocking of the boat that happens in the world. And yet Jesus is showing you what it means to have peace in the midst of hell. By the way, Jesus is not teaching you how to rebuke storms. That's not the lesson he wanted them to learn. Because he turns and says to them, oh, you have little faith. The lesson he wants them to learn is how to sleep in the middle of storms. Boys, take that. When he offers them his peace, they remember these moments. He's the kind of guy that can sleep in the middle of disaster. I'm going to grab some of that.